mind. If I give you a bat and a ball that's worth $1.10 and told you that the bat costs $1 more than the ball, how much did the ball cost? If 10 cents immediately came to your mind, then you've been fooled by what author and psychologist Daniel Kahneman calls your fast thinking system 1. If you used your slow reasoning system 2, you'd realize that if the ball cost 10 cents, then the bat would have to cost $1.10 and the combined cost would be $1.20. Our automatic and intuitive thinking system number 1 and our reasoning system number 2 are like a group of newspaper reporters and a newspaper editor. The reporters, system 1, constantly write stories and deliver them to the editor, system 2. The editor doesn't have time or energy to verify the source of every story, so she decides to blindly trust reporters and publish stories she hasn't verified. Then, after publishing those stories, she defends them, even if they're false. And this gets her and the newspaper in trouble. The same is true for our lives. If we don't learn to slow down and use our editor to verify System 1 reporting, we might find ourselves in the wrong career, or start a business with the wrong partner, or stay in a dysfunctional relationship for too long. There are dozens of ways our intuitive thinking system can fool us. Just Google cognitive biases and you'll be quickly overwhelmed. But after reading Thinking Fast and Slow, I've discovered 3 cognitive biases that result in most of our fast thinking faults. I've slightly modified these biases to fit the acronym FAST, F-S-T. Faulty fast thinking bias number 1, the frequent exposure bias. Author Daniel Kahneman says a reliable way to make people believe in falsehoods is frequent repetition, because familiarity is not easily distinguished from truth. Authoritarian institutions and marketers have always known this fact. The more we see something, the more we trust it. That's why if we don't do our research before an election, we'll trust the candidate whose name we've heard or seen the most. When students at the University of Michigan were exposed to Turkish-sounding words like Kadurga and Sarısık in ad boxes on the front page of the school newspaper for several weeks, those students were more likely to rate the random words as meaning something good on a questionnaire later on. If you and I don't check for the frequent exposure bias, or what psychologists call the mere exposure effect, prior to making an important decision, then our preferences will be based on our environmental conditioning. To combat the frequent exposure bias and exercise our free will, we must pause before a major decision and ask ourselves, is this the best option or just the option I've been frequently exposed to? If I'm hiring a new employee and I prefer candidate A over candidate B, I may simply prefer candidate A because I spent more time with him. To make the best decision, I need to challenge my System 1 judgment and schedule more face-to-face time with the other candidate. When my wife and I bought a house, we made sure to spend equal amounts of time in the homes and the neighborhoods of each of our top 3 choices. If you don't want to fall prey to the frequent exposure, get in the habit of asking yourself, is this the best option or just the option I've been frequently exposed to? Faulty fast thinking bias number 2, the status quo bias. Why do we stay in careers we don't like? Why do CEOs invest more money in failing projects? And why do most investors hold losing stocks for 11 months out of the year and only get the courage to sell those stocks in December to get a tax break? Well, there are 2 reasons: loss aversion and the endowment effect. After decades of research, Daniel Kahneman says losses loom larger than gains. In fact, his research shows that the average person will psychologically weigh a loss twice as much as a gain. Loss aversion explains why many people instinctively turn down the following bet: flip a coin and win $150 on heads, or lose $100 on tails. If the people who turned down this bet would slow down and use System 2 to challenge their System 1 intuition, they'd realize that if they took that bet 10,000 times, they'd be essentially guaranteed to make money. To illustrate the endowment effect, Kahneman gathered a group of random students and gave them a new coffee mug. He then asked them how much they'd be willing to sell their mug for. After recording their answers, he gathered another group of random students and asked them if they wanted the coffee mug or a sum of money they thought would be equivalent to the value of the mug. The first group, the sellers, valued the mug at $7.12. But the second group, the choosers, who didn't own the mug and were free of any emotional attachment to the mug, valued the mug at $3.12. Same mug, slightly different point of view, drastically different perceived value. So if we instinctively overweigh losses, loss aversion, and overvalue what we own and invest in, the endowment effect, we will be trapped by the past and destined to maintain the status quo. To counteract the status quo bias, we must notice when our preference is to maintain the status quo and ask ourselves, what opportunities am I losing by maintaining the status quo? The idea is to use loss aversion against itself and match your fear of losing what you own and what you invest in with losing a better opportunity. That way you give options outside the status quo equal psychological weight. For example, if I invest money in this failing stock, what valuable investments will I not be able to invest my money in? Or if I keep investing my time in this failing project, what other opportunities will I not be able to invest my time in? Faulty fast-thinking bias number 3, tunnel vision. What's your automatic response to the following riddle from Thinking Fast and Slow? Steve is a very shy and withdrawn American who's invariably helpful but has little interest in people or the world of reality. Steve is a meek and tidy soul, and he has a need for order and structure. Is Steve more likely to be a librarian or a farmer? If librarians seem like the based on the limited information I gave you, then you've just been fooled by System 1 again. If you slow down and use System 2, you might realize that the probability of Steve being a librarian is very low. If you verified your fast, intuitive conclusion, you'd realize that there are substantially more farmers than librarians in the United States. In fact, there are roughly 20 times more male farmers than male librarians. Jumping to a conclusion about Steve is a hallmark feature of System 1. System 1 loves to use limited information to form quick judgments and then block out all conflicting information. I call this the tunnel vision bias. Author Daniel Kahneman calls it WYSIATI. What you see is all there is. Kahneman explains that System 1 sees 2 or 3 pieces of information and then infers and invents causes and intentions and then neglects ambiguity and suppresses doubt. This is why you can meet someone and assume you know what they're like based on their profession or what they look like, only to realize much later with much more information that your judgment was completely wrong. To counteract our natural tendency to form beliefs based on limited information, we need to get in the habit of asking ourselves, why might the opposite be true? When I'm given a project that's similar to a project I've done before and believe it'll be easy, I ask myself, why might the opposite be true? This question gets me to test old assumptions, be prepared for new challenges ahead, and prevent me from underestimating a project and misleading other people. Regardless of the situation, asking why might the opposite be true widens our lens and helps us identify helpful information we've been subconsciously ignoring. So the next time you make a big decision and have an automatic intuitive preference, slow down and scan your faulty thinking checklist. Ask yourself, is this the best option or just the option I've been frequently exposed to? Is this the best option or am I adverse to loss and falling for the status quo bias? And am I suffering from tunnel vision and need to explore other possibilities? As Daniel Kahneman says, maintaining one's vigilance against biases is a chore, but the chance to avoid a costly mistake is sometimes worth the effort. That was a core